Hi, this is Matt Baker. On this channel, we have a 3-hour-long video explaining the Christian denominations family tree in great detail using this chart. However, a simplified version of the same thing is also included on our world religions family tree, but as of yet, I've never gone through it in a video. So today, that's what I'm going to do in, let's just say, far less than 3 hours. Take note, if you want to get a copy of either of these wall charts, just head over to usefulcharts.com or click the link in the description or pinned comment. So obviously, Christianity starts with Jesus, who lived from approximately 4 BCE to 30 CE. Since Jesus was a Jew, most of his original followers were also Jews, and they came from several different branches of Second Temple Judaism. Originally, those belonging to the new movement started by Jesus were simply called the followers of the Way. But pretty soon, more and more non-Jews started to join, and thus the movement eventually came to be seen as a completely new religion. Initially, Christianity drew heavily from a group of people known as God-fearers. These were Greeks and Romans who were attracted to Jewish ideas, but did not want to fully convert to Judaism due to all of the various rules involved. Well, Christianity had far fewer requirements. For example, no circumcision and no dietary restrictions, and therefore it was much easier for God-fearers to convert to Christianity, so many of them did. I should also point out that while Christianity was mostly built upon Jewish ideas, it also inherited certain ideas from Greek philosophy. Okay, so another important thing to know is that in its early days, there was not really just one Christianity, but rather many Christianities. From the perspective of the Christianity that eventually became dominant, which I've labeled Proto-Orthodox Christianity, all of the other Christianities were heresies that had to be stamped out. One of the big ones was Gnosticism, which eventually did die out, but ended up influencing both Manichaeism and Mandeism. There were also the Ebionites and Nazarenes, who were mostly Jewish Christians who saw Jesus as the Messiah, but not as God. They too died out, but likely had an influence on the development of Islam. The final alternative to what became the dominant form of Christianity was Arianism, which taught that Jesus was a created being who was elevated to the position of God. The controversy over this led to the Council of Nicaea in 325, in which Arianism was rejected, and the official set of Christian beliefs was written down, resulting in what is known today as the Nicene Creed. According to Nicene Christianity, Jesus and the Father are co-equal and co-eternal. Now, a couple decades later, in 380, Nicene Christianity was made the official state religion of the Roman Empire. But you see, by that point, there were also Christians outside of the Roman Empire, particularly to the east in the Sassanid Persian Empire. Thus, around this time, the Church of the East was established as a distinct group. From here, the main church, the one that existed within the Roman Empire, went on to be organized into 5 main patriarchs, each in a major city: Rome, Constantinople, Antioch, which is in Syria, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, which is in Egypt. And the thing is, there ended up being a bit of disagreement between these areas. In Rome and Constantinople, an additional creed, known as the Chalcedonian Creed, was adopted, and it clarified that although Jesus was equal to God, he had 2 separate natures, one divine and one human. However, the other 3 pentarchies did not accept this creed, arguing instead that Jesus had only one nature, which was both divine and human at the same time. The division between the Chalcedonians and the non-Chalcedonians, who became known as Oriental Orthodox, became even more distinct when all 3 of the non-Chalcedonian areas were taken over by Islam. Christianity continued to exist in those areas, but was now in the minority. Today, the Syriac Orthodox Church, the Coptic Orthodox Church in Egypt, and the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church all trace their roots to the 3 non-Chalcedonian patriarchates from the Roman era. In Rome and Constantinople, though, Christianity continued to be the majority religion, and thus it was these 2 cities that continued to be the main centers of Christianity. For several more centuries, Christianity in these 2 areas continued to be united, but eventually they split. The area under Rome's jurisdiction became known as the Catholic Church, And to this day, it is still led by the Patriarch of Rome, although he's now better known as the Pope. Whereas the area under Constantinople's jurisdiction became known as the Orthodox Church, still led by the Patriarch of Constantinople. Today, the largest branch of the Orthodox Church is actually the Russian Orthodox Church, which in 2018 cut ties with Constantinople. Okay, for the rest of the chart, we'll be looking at the many denominations that came about as a result of the Protestant Reformation. It started in 1517 as a reform movement within the Catholic Church, but quickly led to the creation of 3 new branches of Christianity, mostly along state lines. Lutheranism, based on the teachings of Martin Luther, became dominant in many German states, as well as in Scandinavia. Calvinism, based on the teachings of John Calvin, became dominant in the Dutch Republic and Scotland. And finally, Anglicanism became dominant in England. Take note that the Calvinist branch is also known as the Reformed branch, and that Calvinist churches that trace their roots to Scotland are known as Presbyterians. Now, there was also a 4th Protestant movement early on that was even more radical. Its followers became known as Anabaptists because they taught that adults should be rebaptized. Groups that trace their roots to this movement include the Brethren, the Mennonites, and the Amish. Okay, from here on out, we'll mostly be dealing with the English-speaking world. At first, Great Britain, and then mostly the United States. Since Anglicanism continued to operate a lot like Catholicism, meaning that it had a very top-down structure, a bunch of smaller, more loosely organized church groups eventually started to pop up as well. Collectively, the people belonging to these groups were known as English separatists, and many of them ended up traveling to the Americas, where they could have more religious freedom. However, most of the original groups, such as the Puritans, eventually fizzled out, but 2 that didn't were the Quakers and the Baptists. We'll be coming back to the Baptists in a moment, but for now, take note that there were also many congregations that simply remained independent, hence the term Congregationalists. We now come to the first of the 3 Great Awakenings. These were periods of increased religious fervor that led to the creation of even more new denominations. Now, although the Baptists were around before this time, it wasn't really until the First Great Awakening that their numbers really started to grow. For example, it was at this point that many Congregationalists, inspired by all the increased religious fervor, began to identify as Baptist. The other big denomination connected to the First Great Awakening is the Methodist Church. It was primarily built by former Anglicans, most notably a man named John Wesley. Okay, around 80 years later, there was a second Great Awakening, and this time things took place exclusively in the United States. It attracted mainly Congregationalists, Baptists, and Methodists, but then shuffled many of them into new denominations, such as the Disciples of Christ and the Plymouth Brethren. However, the 3 largest denominations that came about as a result of the Second Great Awakening are the Seventh-day Adventists, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and the Mormons. They differ from other denominations in that they all departed from traditional Nicene Christianity. This is why they are shown in beige instead of purple, except for the Seventh-day Adventists, as they have since moved back towards Nicene beliefs. All right, finally we come to the Third Great Awakening, which initially started out as a movement among Methodists, leading to the creation of the Holiness Churches. However, perhaps more importantly, following the Azusa Street Revival in Los Angeles, it also led to the Pentecostal movement, and in turn the Charismatic movement, both of which are associated with speaking in tongues. But another key aspect of the Third Great Awakening was the rise of fundamentalism, which involves very literal interpretations of Scripture and very conservative viewpoints. While not a denomination of its own, fundamentalism is followed by many Pentecostals and by many Baptists. At the other end of the spectrum is the very liberal United Church of Christ, which traces its roots back to the many independent Congregationalist groups from early American history. Okay, so that was a very quick overview of the Christian denominations family tree. Like I say, if you want a much deeper dive, you can check out the 3-hour-long video we made on the same topic. And if you want to get a copy of either the World Religions family tree or the Christian denominations family tree, Be sure to visit our website, usefulcharts.com. Thanks for watching.